Hi and welcome. Today we are joined by Willem Haarhoff, the founder of DoughGetters Accounting. The DoughGetters Accounting team empowers entrepreneurs and their teams to flourish with the help of cutting-edge accounting solutions tailored to their needs. Their services include outsourced bookkeeping, accounting, and tax compliance, all designed to facilitate the growth and development of businesses. Their team is spread across South Africa, embracing remote work and flexible working. With many companies returning to in-office models, we wanted to speak to Willem about his views on remote work post-pandemic and where he sees the future of work, especially for accountants.
You're listening to Beyond Insights, your go-to podcast for all things accounting, business, and technology. And this month, we'd like to wish all our listeners a joyous festive season.
From unwrapping the role of women in tech to decking the halls with accounting and small business insights, we've got your holiday season covered.
This time of year, we're reminded of the power of collaboration and connection. We are grateful to be able to host such amazing guests from around the world.
This festive season, we'll be unwrapping new ideas to deliver solutions to some of the biggest business challenges, helping you plan for a brighter, more successful year ahead.
Warm wishes for a Merry Christmas, a joyful Hanukkah, and a happy holiday season to all our listeners.
Thank you for tuning in during this special season. Let's dive right in and go beyond insights. Thanks for joining us today, Willem. I'm really excited to have you here. Welcome to Beyond Insights.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks so much for the invite, and I'm looking forward to the next half an hour or so chatting with you.
Yeah, interesting topic today. We're talking about remote work specifically, and whether or not remote work is here to stay. And maybe just to get us started on the topic of remote work, I think South Africa specifically saw a boom in remote work during COVID-19, where a lot of businesses and organizations needed to pivot. Traditionally, they would have all of their staff in office on a day-to-day basis, and then obviously needed to pivot. Everyone was being quarantined and isolated, and the evolution of work kind of shifted to being very remote and doing a lot of virtual calls virtually with customers and clients, especially in professional services industry. And now that we're kind of out of the COVID slump, there are a lot of companies that are expecting their employees to be back to 5 days a week in office. So a bit of a change there. How do you see the future of remote work, and how has remote work informed your specific business model?
Yeah, I'm super excited about the topic today. It's something that I'm really passionate about. Seeing that we as a business, we are a remote working business, and that's part of our DNA since we launched about 8 years ago. But I think I was personally a little bit surprised how quickly the world pivoted from your traditional office-based work environment to a remote-based work environment. And I believe COVID-19 helped the world to open Pandora's box, so to speak, because I think it's completely inconceivable to imagine a world where we will be back completely to an office-based environment. I just don't see that happening. So I think from that perspective, I believe remote work is here to stay. It's most definitely part of the future. But I do also believe that it is super important that companies find a balance between the two. I don't think that it is a realistic expectation for companies to think that you can forever only be a remote working business, because I think what you gain by having a remote working culture, you kind of lose a little bit of sense of belonging and that team spirit and the culture that you're trying to build. So it becomes a lot more difficult to maintain it. So I think if you had to ask me today and you had to push me for a absolute decision where I would sit, I'd probably say 80% remote work, 20% office bound.
So 1 day a week in office and 4 days remote.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. In fact, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And I think
Mandated across the team, everyone in office on the same day, or would you say depending on which day they would like to come in?
yeah, my personality, I'd say gravitate towards the latter one. I like the flexibility and giving people options to choose. Perhaps it makes sense to have at least one day a month, maybe, or maybe every second week, depending on each business's identity, to make sure everybody gets together at the same time. But in our case, for example, that won't be practical because our team is nationwide. So, to expect that kind of cadence is going to be impractical. So in our case, we try to get together as a team maybe once every 6 months or once every 12 months. And that's great. And then we kind of form pods to increase the cadence of that. So we might have little pockets of people meeting together more regularly. But it's just that again, that sense of belonging, that you're part of a bigger team, because I think people get alone quite quickly if you only work from home.
Absolutely. I suppose it differs from org to org, right? And the nature of your service offerings. And of course, there is that factor of, well, where are your employees based? It might not be practical to have everyone in the office on the same day at the same
Yes.
time. So I like that suggestion of working in pods and smaller teams and making sure at least, or at the very least, those members of that specific pod are all together at the same time. So that's
Yeah.
practical advice for anyone that's looking at that model. Of course, remote work is quite a broad topic, and we are going to be diving into some of the different aspects of remote work today. And it has overarching ramifications in a lot of different areas, not only of personal life and work-life balance, but broader societal consequences as well. So I'm excited to dive into some of those with you today. What would you say some of the major pros are of remote work, Willem?
I think as an employee, it definitely gives you a lot more flexibility over your time. If you're anything like me, just knowing that I've got that flexibility means a lot. So I think flexibility, and then just basically building your daily routine according to what works for you, because not everybody is great at getting up early in the morning and being in the office, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to work. So, some people are more effective in the afternoons, others are more effective in the evenings, in the mornings. So I think that helps quite a bit. I think as an employer, that it gives you the ability to provide, shall I say, a more attractive, potentially more attractive, package to your staff. Because I think, and again, maybe coming back to one of my first observations, if as an employer you mandate your staff to work in the office 5 days a week, 24, like 9 to 5, I think you're going to struggle to compete. And I think everybody knows that there's a war for talent out there. It's not as easy as it used to be to get people to work for you. And I think if you are able to provide a remote work aspect to your business, you automatically increase the pool of talent from where you can pick.
Absolutely. Alex, one of the producers of the Beyond Insights podcast series, did some research, and in her findings, she discovered that there was general perception in the labor market that employees were happy to take a bit of a pay cut for that flexibility of remote work. So I completely agree with you. I think it is quite attractive, especially if you're living in lovely places like Cape Town or Durban next to the beach, where you can go for a bit of a surf in the afternoon or a ride on the mountains or whatever the case may be. But on the other hand, I suppose there is that risk of always needing to, or feeling like you always need to be available or on call. And there is, with that, of course, the risk of burnout. And how would you say, what advice would you give to anyone that might be experiencing that currently, or might be afraid that if they were to pursue a career in remote work, that's a risk for them?
Yeah, that's super important. I mean, I'm speaking from personal experience mostly, and I want to start with the employer, because I believe the employer has a moral obligation to take the lead and to create an environment where their people will thrive. And so if you operate a remote working environment, you've got to take a few practical steps to ensure that that does not happen. I think firstly, it's important for the employer to make a point of not connecting with their employees after hours. So the fact that people have that flexibility does not give you the license to send them WhatsApps at 9 o'clock at night or at 5 o'clock in the morning. Because again, one of the benefits of remote working is that it allows teams to work asynchronously, which I think is a massive benefit. But you got to balance that with still respecting your people's time. I think that would be the one thing. The second thing that I think an employer should do is to allow their people, even though they might work from any location if it's remote, not allow people, but encourage them to get up in the mornings, shower, go out, go and get the bacon, and then go back home. So the idea of remote work from your room or in your pajamas may sound appealing, but it definitely over the long term will not do it won't end well. I think again, I think most people, I'm not a psychologist, but I'm speaking from experience. I think most people would benefit from getting out there, wherever that might be. And there's various ways in which one can do it, but you got to get out there and come back again. And it's also, in my mind, part of just any human need to have community and to interact with people. If you're introverted, maybe the need is lower than the rest. If you're extroverted, you might need to be amongst people all the time. But I don't think there's any one person that can never be out there and benefit from community. So I think those would be the most important aspects for me when I think about that environment.
Absolutely. Speaking from experience as well, having worked remotely for about a year and a half during COVID specifically, although I was having meetings all day and engaging with customers and the rest of the team virtually, I still felt a bit lonely, and that was because I was obviously isolated to being inside and not really having that personal interaction, or just seeing that there does exist the world out there. So even if it does mean walking around the block or whatever the case may be, a change of scenery is quite important.
Yeah, and I think it's also how you decide to prioritize your tasks. And I think as an employee, you need to take ownership of your diary, and you need to also take ownership of the boundaries you set. And it goes back to the kind of culture of the organization where you work, because the reality is that many companies maintain a culture of, the boss is the boss and the staff is the staff. And, whatever the boss says and does goes. And, I think it's difficult to thrive in an environment like that. So as an employee, if you also got to take responsibility who you choose to work for. So it might be attractive in that they offer you a remote working solution, but once you get in there, you might see, but hang on, they're actually abusing you because of those potential risks that I've outlined. And then one of the things we also encourage our people to do is to look at their diary and to block specific hours for doing specific things. And one of the things I like to do is have the flexibility that, let's say I feel tired at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I want to go for a run, that I have the freedom to do it. And I can now quickly spend 90 minutes to go for a run, grab a shower, maybe grab a 30-minute sleep, and then continue my work. But then making sure that the work that I do that might be after hours is such that I don't need to connect with other people, so that I can respect their boundaries as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Really important. Willem, at DoughGetters, how would you say specifically you foster organizational culture and build organizational culture, but like positive organizational culture from a remote work aspect?
Yeah, in that context, this is probably one of the most difficult things to do, and something that continues to keep me awake at night. The risk if you don't do it properly is that you might have team members that might go through a horrible time, whatever, it might be work related, might be mental, family, whatever, it could be many things. And they can go through those tough times, and you might not even know about it. And that for me is the biggest risk and the most scary thought when I consider this issue. So I think, apart from the matters that I've already highlighted as things to do, I think one's got to be very intentional. So, for example, some of the things we do is we have got a bi-weekly all hands meeting where everybody's got to log in. We get onto a Teams meeting and we chat. And that meeting is not for us to talk business. It's to talk nonsense. It's to share stories, to tell jokes, play a few online games, and just have fun together, so that as a team we can connect and find out how people are doing. The other thing that we also do, and I do intentionally with my team, some of my team members, I make sure I call them one-to-one at least once a month. And again, the purpose of that phone call is just to hear how are you doing. And got a few probing questions I normally ask to help me gather enough information to ensure that the people are doing okay. And then the people I work more closely with, we've got weekly check-ins. And then, like I said before, we've got more, we've got regular pods that meet, in an in-person scenario that people can also connect. It's not 100% foolproof system. We don't have a perfect answer for it. We are fellow travelers in the world of remote work. And, we continue to learn. And, when we see new things or when something happens, we try to always find ways to make sure it doesn't happen again if it's got a negative impact on the team.
Of course, it's about iterating and improving processes and learning as you go, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what is really important along the journey.
Yeah.
Just chatting about younger employees that you might have in your organization, there is a growing concern that remote work may limit mentorship, because typically this was something that was done face to face or working really closely in a physical presence alongside someone. So the concern is obviously about mentorship and career growth off the back of that. And then with that comes learning opportunities. Do you believe that remote work can affect career progression? And if so, how can companies address this?
Yeah, so I don't believe remote work per se would be a barrier to mentorship. And I mean, without giving away my age, because the older you are, the less cooler you are. But I've been in the workforce, for almost 30 years. And I've worked for different kind of bosses. And I've seen good examples, I've seen bad examples. And you can sit in an office building and you can work for a boss that's not, that doesn't have a strong propensity to mentor people. So whether you sit in an office or not in an office, it doesn't matter. You won't get the mentorship you need. So I think mentorship is a function of a willing teacher and a willing participant. So, and that for me, again, speaks back to the culture of the business. Is the business, does it have a culture where they want to promote people, where they want to help people thrive in their business? More importantly, do you look at your employees as a captive audience, or do you look at your employees as using you as a stepping stone to achieve something better? And I'm of the belief that you should always look at your employees as temporary sojourners, if you will, using you to improve themselves. And they might decide to stay, but they might decide to move on. And you gotta be ready to let them go, because it's not about you, it's about them. And so that's what we try to do.
Awesome. Great answer. I love that. Just talking about equity and access with remote work specifically. So remote work can sometimes cause disparities between those who have ideal home setups and workspaces in and at home, and those that do not. And I'm talking about everything from, kids that are at home to grandparents that might be there, to unstable or shoddy Wi-Fi connections, and hardware that might not be really as fast as others. How does DoughGetters kind of address this and bridge the gap in that disparity, Willem?
Yeah, so we busy upskilling on that, because we're not perfect. We don't, we've not started with that in mind, and that's a policy we're busy fine-tuning. So for all the new people that we are employing and that we have employed this year, we part of the recruitment process, we make sure we ask those questions, and it's an important aspect. And that's not to qualify or disqualify a person. It's just to make sure that their expectations and our expectations are properly tempered. And then, the kind of support we provide would make sure that, there's a appropriate hardware, which may include a laptop. In the time when we still had lots of load shedding, we would also provide support to have like a battery pack. And a battery pack, sufficient to power a laptop and a second screen, a lamp, and, a Wi-Fi connection and your cell phone, so that you can go for at least 4 to 5 hours. So we provided support for that. And then even so, to go so far as to provide a communication allowance, which would then include support for proper internet connection. Beyond that, we also encourage people, like I said in the beginning, not to think of only working from your home. There are other places where one can go and work in a more public setting, co-working spaces and whatnot. And so there are ways around that, and it's just being aware of it and making sure that you ask the questions and then you address it if it becomes a concern.
That's a good strategy, I think. Just on the topic of collaboration, and of course, with collaboration and working remotely, there's an element of creativity, whether it's solving a unique or novel problem. It often does entail needing to get a few minds together to troubleshoot or come up with different ideas. Have you found this to be challenging in remote work as opposed to working in or occupying the same physical space? And what strategies can you share to foster creativity in a remote work setup?
Yeah, I think, again, I would say that remote work in and of itself should not be seen as an impediment to get that creative juices flowing. Similar to my point on the mentorship, whether you put it or sit in the same office or not, you can find ways to do it. I think it's about being mindful. So as a business, it's important that you set time aside specifically for those white canvas moments. And so whether you do it in person together or not, technology allows us to still get together and collaborate. And again, there's various ways. There's some amazing apps out there that can even help you, if it's digital, to facilitate a white canvas session. But I think it's making sure that you make time for it, and being deliberate about it, and that those meetings aren't overtaken by other less interesting stuff, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree completely with you. There's so many different apps on the market that just boosts collaboration in the workspace, and really do help with unlocking that creative side of different employees and people that are involved in that process. And the lovely thing about it is you might not be feeling so creative right now, and that's completely fine. At 5 o'clock when you wake up and you decide you want to start your workday, you can jump on. It needn't be, oh, well, here's the whiteboard, it's going clean after this meeting kind of thing.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Just on the topic of course, with working remote and dealing with lots of clients' data, there is the factor of privacy and security and confidentiality. How do you best monitor and make sure that your internal privacy policies are being adhered to without eroding the trust of your employees and making it feel to them that they may be spied on, perhaps?
Yeah, that's definitely a stay awake issue. And for us, we start with process. I think it's all about your process and your protocols, and it starts from your recruitment phase. When you hire people, when they start working, during their onboarding. So I think it starts with that. Part of that is the tone that you set from the top. And how the leaders in the organization go about making sure they themselves are accountable to those processes. Our culture is not one of peeking over someone's shoulder, so to speak, and to try and second guess them around every corner. We prefer to work on an exception basis. So we, for example, don't monitor people's clicking rate on their laptops, for example. Now, that's not exactly about the topic, but I think it's analogous to it. And then I think we also make sure that we remind people generally, of good practice in terms of keeping data secure. we have a POPI policy in our business that we comply with, and we're busy refreshing that now. And then I think in terms of the apps that you use, I can't think of any app that we use of the many that there's not a strong data security and compliance protocol embedded in what they do. So when you sign up for the first time, you've also got to agree to their standard terms and conditions. And I think any app company that's out there that does not take that super serious, they don't have a long-term business. They're going to not survive. So we place a lot of reliance on that. And so from our perspective, it's then important that our staff and our team members know and understand what good password and access control protocols entail. So it's a combination of factors. And then, of course, the other aspect is that in some cases, well, in most cases, you need to make sure you've got some Chinese walls, so to speak. In other words, I can't get my one team to share data of their client with another team. So one's got to be careful there as well.
Yeah, that segregation of duties, I suppose, is very important. I liked what you were saying earlier about, the fact that a lot of apps these days are built to maintain that privacy. And I suppose it's a big emphasis on just being smart about your usage of these tools when you are working on them. And not being too clumsy with your treatment and working on these apps specifically. By way of sharing tips, and of course, Willem, you've been in the industry for a hell of a long time, and remote work is not something that is new to you or to your team. As a tip to the listeners today, or one or two tips, what would you say you wish you knew back then when you were starting up that you know now?
Sure. Yeah, I think the importance of getting up in the morning, washing your face, getting dressed, going out, I think that's super important. I allowed myself to be a victim to that for quite a long time, and it did lead to a rather dark path in terms of feeling depressed and not mentally well. Fortunately, I recognized it and I got out of it quickly. So that's super important. And I think it's to be open-minded and to allow yourself to be flexible in your support, because you might have access to that way of working, but you might still be stuck in your mind that you have to burn hours from 8 until 4 every single day. But maybe loosen up a bit, get a bit out there and change your schedule around a bit so you can do other nice things when the sun is shining. I think for me, if you don't do that, you kind of, I don't want to be too judgmental, but you're kind of missing the point of the benefit of remote work. So those would be the top two tips. Yeah, correct.
Yeah, absolutely. Crystal ball out. What does the future of remote work look like? Where do you see it heading in the next 5-10 years?
I think it will definitely stay. It'll be difficult for me to say in terms of what percentage I think would be the sort of the standard, but I think it's going to definitely stay. And if as a company you don't have that as a centerpiece of your employment strategy, I think you are doing yourself a disservice. I don't think it will stand you in good stead for the long term.
And technological advances, do you see us all interacting with one another virtually or using VR or that sort of tech? What tech predictions would you like to see, or do you see, if you've got any off the top of your mind?
Yeah, I think virtual reality sounds interesting, but I would love I would hope that the real in-person human-to-human interaction will never go away. If that happens, I also think the world will be in trouble.
It is very important, and there are certainly pros to remote work, but it is something that does need to be managed quite carefully, especially as a business owner and managing productivity quite carefully within your organization. Right. But a lot of pros to it, of course, as well. Any closing remarks you would like to make, Willem?
Yeah, I think just from my side, thank you for just this chat. I think it's important to get the message out there. I would love to see more people working remotely. It's just because it's lekker, am I allowed to use that word on this podcast?
Absolutely. South Africa, after all.
Yeah, amazing. yeah, and just to allow us to get out there more and to explore different parts of the country. And yeah, that's what I would say.
Absolutely. Take advantage of remote work if you do have a remote work environment at your current job, or if you are looking to pursue that. I think that's a very good tip, and one that I wish I knew personally when I was starting out my remote work journey. Thank you so much for joining us today, Willem. That was a really good chat.
Thank you so much. Have a lucky day, man.
Keep well. Chat soon.
Thanks for tuning in to the Beyond Insights podcast.
Please like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to right now.
And please share with any of your colleagues or friends or family members that you think might benefit from listening to this podcast.
That's all from us. Until next time, see you then.